You are a doctor, and you have been in patient care. One of the things that I'm interested in is this fact of that the liberty that people have to go to church, right? They want to get together. It's enshrined in the Constitution. It appears to me that you have the right to do it. But at the same time, people bring up with me, hey, you go to church and you spread this disease. You are adding a huge number of people that could get really, really sick and take that into a hospital and infect more medical workers because they're right now way behind on protective equipment. And that's so bad that we should create a rule that says you can stop people from going to church. I want to do the right answer, but it feels to me like liberty is the bigger risk than getting people sick. But if it's me, if my wife were a nurse, I would be like, hell no, don't let them go and do that. So how should I think about this more objectively?
That's a good question. Because it should just be any kind of people gathering. It should be subject to needing that distance, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what setting it's in. And I know that, for some of the people who are, into the worship and all of that, like they want to go to church, right? Especially Easter was just this past weekend, right? So for that case, I mean, it should just be kind of all around that, you need to be socially distant, preferably isolated from one another for the time being. I mean, there's some people who are afraid that it might become permanent. But for religious, I don't think it shouldn't become permanent like that, provided that, these people who are enforcing the policies are true to their word. And so then the question is that if we can't get together to do business or to do the normal things that we would have over the last, my entire lifetime up until now, that church, I mean, it's the same thing, right? That if you abstract it to the highest level to say, these are still people that are getting together and we're trying to stop that by isolating and separating people for the time being, then they would have to be held to their word to say that for the time being is the crucial clause there. Because it can't just be like, well, we don't like your religion, so we're just going to say you can never get together ever again, right? Then that would be overstepping the bound. But this is for the time being. We can't do business. There's a lot of things we can't do. I think there was a special on TV. What is it? One of the big churches in Texas, they did like a televised session for Easter. Obviously, it's not ideal. It's not optimal, but nothing is optimal right now.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it until you were saying it like in this way. It's not like they're letting some people go to church and not others. It's not like they're saying, hey, the Catholics over here, they're cool, but the Jewish people, they're not allowed to go. Like that's not happening. And so I will give it credit that it does seem to be, at least along religious lines, evenly applied. And then you just have the question of essential services versus church. But I take your point. I don't think people should. I'm not going to do it. I think my biggest concern is, and this is the concern a lot of people have, is are we sure the disease is so bad that we should give up liberties? And are we certain that we're going to get them back? And that's what people are afraid of. That's the context. And I would love to just let it pass and, hey, by July, we're going to get all our rights back and everything's fine. But I'm concerned that maybe it's just easier to govern people if they're locked in their house. What do you think of that?
Well, it's easier to govern people when they're locked in their house, but it's not easy to govern them when they don't have food to eat and when they're not generating any revenue. So that would probably be the counterpoint to it, because just thinking about it, this is the one time that we're living through this. When people talk about, the 1918 flu and, how people got through it or whatever, nobody alive today was alive back then, right? There's probably a couple people who are, over 100 years old now. But if they are that age, they probably don't remember the year 1918. So no, none of us have actually lived through something like this. We've read accounts of it having passed. And so I think the vigilance would need to be on the other side. It would be, how do we get everything back when life returns to normal. The question is that what is it going to look like when life is normal? Because how do we know whether or not that virus is going to start spreading around again, right? We don't know. And so those are all the questions. And I would say the easiest way is to keep your eyes on China to see what they're doing, because they're the ones that are furthest ahead in time on this, right? Just like on social media back in January and February, you saw a lot of, haha, look at China, look at what they're doing, haha, look at this response, right? And then if you look at the reality just beyond the words, we're doing it now too, right? And so it would be reasonable to suspect that those other countries who have gotten past the point that we're at now are probably doing the same thing on their social medias to us, saying, haha, look at this response, and laughing. And that's just because they were watching what was being done here back then. And then if we have to look at how they're doing it because they're furthest ahead. Do we want to exactly replicate what they're doing? It probably wouldn't work given the differences in culture here, but we have to kind of see the principles of what was being done, why it was being done, and then if parts of it can be applied here, which parts would it be? And
I have to imagine that the Chinese crackdown, or at least the Chinese stay-at-home order, was much more thoroughly enforced than what it is here. I don't know, but I can tell you that when I drive from point A to point B for a very limited task, I think there's maybe a 15% reduction in the number of cars that I used to see out and about. Now, I'm on main thoroughfares, so it could be that off in the arteries or on the veins that are way away from regular commerce, they're a lot lower. But man, there are a lot of people out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like even sometimes, like if I need to go out and get lunch or something, right, for pickup, you just drive by the Target and the parking lot is packed, right, on a Saturday afternoon, and you're just like, that's I think inside the store they probably have nice precautions, but the point is that you don't want that large gathering of people, right? And so over in China, I know some people that were on my translation team were telling me they had community leaders that they had to report into, and like a community leader would check the seals on the doors to make sure that people weren't like leaving their place. And so I don't know if those community leaders were associated with government or if they were volunteer that were given down by like the local government, but they did that over there. I think they can do that over here. We would not be able to get away with doing that here. That's for sure.
Well, so impression, and this is interesting to hear about what your perspective is, because the impression is that the reason that it worked in China to have the limitation measures they did is because either they used force or that the people were afraid of their government, that they would have to do that. But there is the perspective that they also have a more community-minded spirit, right? Like the idea of disappointing the community because you were the lone person that just kept going out and doing what you wanted to do, you would be socially isolated much faster there. Is that accurate or fair to?
So to your point on fear, I actually, when I talked with those people, and I have family there too, it doesn't seem like there's fear of government over there. What it seemed like was fear of endangering others. And so in a community sense, it was a little bit different. They have more of a mindset to say, this is, they have more of like a community mindset rather than here we have more of an individual mindset. So it's a little bit different culturally. But, like when they saw stuff like the initial campaign here, 15 days to limit spread, I remember some of their comments were, I'm afraid it's going to have to be a little longer than 15 days, right? And the reality is that if they were being honest about it, it wasn't 15 days. We understand they were trying to stage expectations. So they say 15 days back in March, but reality is that it's probably closer to 75 days to limit spread is what the full campaign would probably be if they were to put it that way. But over here, you do kind of want to stage the expectations. Problem with staging the expectation is now we don't actually know when it's going to end. So like in Virginia, I think the stay-at-home orders until June 10th. I don't know why, but it's I would say that's probably a little bit more realistic. Just saying with how things are.